Number 7, how was the book delivered? This deals with chain of custody. How did it get from God the Father to John? Because the book's contents are so radical. I mean, we have to know that this is really from God. And so in the legal forensic world, you establish a chain of custody when you present evidence in a court of law. How did the evidence get to us? Well, you have the same sort of thing described here in the book of Revelation. Notice Revelation 1, verse 1, verse 3, verse 11, and chapter 2, verse 1. It gives you the chain of custody. It says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God, that would be God the Father, gave him to show his bondservants the things which must soon take place, and he communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John. And then notice verse 11. John is told, write in a book which you see, and send it to the 7 churches. And then it mentions the 7 churches in Asia Minor. Then in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, to the angel of the first church, the church at Ephesus. And then the verse I skipped is Revelation 1:3, which says, blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of the prophecy, and heed the things written in it, for the time is near. You see the chain of custody here? Number 1, it goes from God the Father to Jesus, to an angel, to John. From John, it goes to a book, as John is a stenographer, writing down what he saw. From the book, it goes to an angelos. Now, is that angel number 2? Because we already had an earlier angel. Is it handed from an angel to John to a book back to another angel? Some argue that. They try to argue that from the fact that everywhere else in the book of Revelation, angel always means angel. So it went from God the Father to God the Son, to an angel, to John, who wrote it down, and then John handed it off to another angel. But I don't think that's a very good interpretation, because as you work your way down through this chain of communication, you're kind of going from greater to lesser. God the Father hands it off to God the Son, who submits to God the Father, who hands it off to an angel, who's a created being, who hands it off to John, a human being, who's less than an angel. John, an apostle, puts it in a book, and the book goes to not another apostle, but someone lower in the chain called an angelos, who I believe is a preacher or a pastor or a proclaimer, one in each church, angelos, over each of the 7 churches in Asia Minor, to the pastor of the church at Ephesus, to the pastor of the church at Sardis, to the pastor of the church at Smyrna, to the pastor of the church at Thyatira, to the pastor of the church at Philadelphia, to the pastor of the church at Laodicea, etc., etc. And then as it's proclaimed in those churches, it goes to the hearer or the listener. And as the hearer or the listener, the flock in each of those churches listens to the book being expounded by the pastor and the preacher, and then maybe has a chance to read it themselves, they begin to apply it to their lives, and as they apply it to their lives, they're blessed. Now, why do I take the second angel there as a reference to a pastor? Because if you have it going from John back to an angel, then the order from greater to lesser is interrupted, number 1. And number 2, a pastor or a prophet or a proclaimer can be called in the Bible an angelos, or an angel. John the Baptist in Matthew 11 verse 10 in the original Greek is called an angelos, translated messenger. It says here of John the Baptist, Matthew 11 verse 10, this is the one whom it was written, behold, I send my messenger, and it's a translation from the Greek word angelos, ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. So a preacher can be called an angelos. So I think it goes to a real angel first, and then John, when he puts it and writes it in a book, is having it sent to a preacher or a pastor. So here's what the whole chain of custody, chain of communication looks like. And we have to know this because this is a radical message. I got to know this really came from the Lord. So the custody or the chain of communication is established. When you put those verses together that we just read, the vision comes from the Father to Christ the Son, to an angel, to John. Now, John sees the vision and writes it down in a book. And then the book is going to go to a preacher over each of the pastors over the various churches. And then we would assume that people in the church have a chance to hear the message and then perhaps read the content. So from a preacher to a reader who would be a listener or a reader in the 7 churches. And as these people read and heed what this vision says, there's a biblical promise that they will be blessed. This is why John, 2 times in the book, worships the angel and is rebuked by the angel. It happens in Revelation 19:10, and it happens a second time. We'll go through the verses later. I want to say Revelation 22:8 and 9, where John is so overwhelmed by what he has received from this angel that he starts to worship the angel. And the angel twice says, knock it off. I'm just a servant like you. I'm just someone in the chain of custody, in the chain of communication. Worship God, not me, because this vision ultimately comes from God the Father.